Hi guys, so Lotus Gobblers has officially arrived, giving us an exhilarating experience lasting shorter than I usually do, which is quite an achievement. So after enjoying that nothing burger, I quickly went to test and build Sevagoth Prime, which was released simultaneously alongside the Epitaph Prime, the Nautilus Prime and the Verglas Prime. All of these primes are practically straight upgrades over all of their base variants, with Nautilus now being able to trigger reinforced bond together with calculated redirection, the Epitaph and the Verglas Prime having increased stats across the board, with the Epitaph Prime even getting an increase in range, and finally Sevagoth Prime benefiting from increased shields, armor and energy. Today's build will combine the use of Sevagoth's Augment into one single build, only costing 2 forma for the cheap version of this build and 3 forma for the min-maxed version. So without further ado, let me jump into the Simulacrum, where I will go over his abilities and discuss the builds that I have made. Okay, so here we are in the Simulacrum. First, let's go over his passive. His passive is a revive ability where on death you will become his shadow, and you are able to fight and resurrect Sevagoth by collecting 5 souls, which you need to rebuild his tombstone. The 5 souls can be gained by dashing through enemies, which will always be instantly killed. Just make sure that you as the shadow do not die, so you do have a shield and a health bar, and if you die you will lose the ability to revive Sevagoth, and you will immediately go into choosing to revive yourself, which means that the operator ability to revive yourself also gets disabled in this particular interaction. His first ability, Reap, will spawn Sevagoth's shadow, which flies around. Upon casting Reap, you will inflict Death's Harvest within a specific radius, which is modded by ability range, and you will inflict a small amount of radiation damage to enemies as well. The Death Harvest will cause damage for an ability on enemies, which will also be there for a certain duration, and this duration is able to be scaled by ability duration, and the damage for an ability is able to be scaled by ability strength. His second ability, Sow, will cause true damage upon enemies per second to 50 at base, which can be increased by ability strength. The duration of this ability can also be increased with ability duration, and the range is already quite big but is scalable with ability range, which causes Sow to be applied upon enemies within a 42.4 meter radius, which is absolutely massive, and it synergizes with his first ability because you reap what you sow. So when you cast Reap on sown enemies, you will deal 25% of their current health as true damage, and upon death they will deal 25% of their health to enemies around them, also as true damage, which is within a 4 meter radius, and sadly this cannot be increased by ability range, but the true damage that you get from the Reap and Sow interaction is able to be scaled by viral procs, for instance, and by ability strength. So if enough enemies are within range of each other, within the 4 meter range that you need, they will be able to start a chain reaction, killing all of the enemies. His third ability, Gloom, will slow down enemies when they walk within its range. It starts out as a relatively small range, but then it slowly grows outward. Every enemy affected by it will cause you to drain energy, so this can be a very energy heavy ability to have running in the background, so make sure you are aware of this. And if you see yourself running out of energy very quickly, just quickly disable Gloom, and then you can re-enable it once your energy is back up. The slow effect will be able to be skilled with ability strength, as well as the lifesteal that you get from this ability. Gloom is also his Subsume ability, so a lot of players might be familiar with this ability on other frames as well. It's one of the main abilities subsumed onto other frames if you don't know what to put on them, because it's very good at base star chart and the beginning of Steel Path if you don't go into the crazy high levels. If you do go into the crazy high levels, Gloom is still okay to slow down enemies and have them group up within their spawns. However, the lifesteal that you get from it is negligible because you will most likely be doing some kind of shield gating or overguard gating at super high levels, because you will be one shot once your shield breaks or once your overguard breaks. Then I chose to subsume his shadow off and replace it with Roar. Roar will also increase the true damage that you get from the Reap and Sow interaction, which means you can more easily go above 100% true damage, meaning you can instantly kill all the enemies that you sow and then reap. Roar and the interaction with Reap and Sow is also why I am running 4 ability strength shards on my Sevagoth, because I am building for max range, so I have to dump strength. And then finally I'm running an effectiveness on energy orbs, because casting your 2 and your 1 so often is quite energy intensive, especially with Gloom in the background, which you might be running too. and having to keep roar up, all of this will combine into having a massive energy cost. So all the energy we can get, we will take. In terms of the build, I have a min-maxed as well as a cheap build. I will go through all of the min-max stuff first, and then I will cover all of the cheap versions of these builds as well at the end. So to get into this build, it's a shield gating build, which means I'm using Brief Respite together with catalyzing shields to make sure that my shields is small enough to be instantly restored, which means that I am running one auger mod here on the frame itself, and then I have the other auger mod on the Epitaph, which I will show in a little bit. I am running some extra duration, so I do not have to recast Roar the entire time, and it saves me some recasting of Sow. I then run almost max range with these 3 mods right here, so Stretch, Overextended, and Auger Reach. I have Primed Flow for extra energy because we are casting a load of abilities. I have Molt Augmented to increase the ability strength throughout the mission by killing enemies, which will synergize nicely with Roar, as well as the true damage combo from Reap and Sow. I'm running Arcane Energize to make sure that I have enough energy to cast everything that I need. And then I have Primed Sure-Footed because I am priming enemies constantly with the Epitaph, and otherwise I am being knocked around all of the time. Now there is a very niche interaction, which is possibly a bug, but I will show it nonetheless in a little bit. This might mean that you are not required to run Primed Sure-Footed, but I haven't done so far, so feel free to test it out and see if you can go without Primed Sure-Footed. Then I'm running both of the Sevagoth augments, so Dark Propagation as well as Shadow Haze. Dark Propagation helps us spread Sow without having to cast it, because on enemy death, Sow is spread within a certain radius, and this radius is affected by ability range, as you see right here. So Dark Propagation will mean that Sow spreads in a 40-meter radius upon enemy death, which is still absolutely massive, meaning that you do not really have to recast Sow as long as you make sure to be within range where you are nuking, and if you are following enemy spawns, you can usually wait with recasting Sow until it's ran out, and then you can recast it again. The Shadow Haze augment will increase the critical chance against enemies that are inflicted with Death Harvest. This also scales with ability strength, so at the moment it's 50%, but it will go up once Molt Augmented is stacked. And what this augment also does is, on enemy death, a new shadow emerges from an enemy that dies, and this is counted as a recast of this ability, I believe, meaning that within that range, so within the 21.2 meter range of Reap, you will apply Reap again, causing the true damage to occur on enemies, meaning that you get this chain reaction of enemies dying. So you will often, with this build, see enemies far into the distance without even being in line of sight, like multiple tiles away from you, instantly die from this interaction with these two augments. Then the other weapon that is nice to run is the Kuva Sobek. I'm running the Kuva Sobek because sometimes you will end up with enemies on super low health, and you can instantly take them out with this build, and then Acid Shells will do another chain reaction of instant kills to get rid of all of those enemies that are left on super low life. There's also a cheap version of this, which looks like this. But this will perform significantly worse, so just be aware of that. For the Epitaph, I'm currently using it as a primer for Viral to increase the true damage that we can deal with Sow and Reap. I have this Riven for status chance, multi-shot, and status duration, but you can also run Lethal Torrent right there for increased fire rate as well as multi-shot. For the Arcane, I'm running Secondary Fortifier. Secondary Fortifier has a weird interaction on Sevagoth, where if you cast Sow and go into your operator, from that point onward, Sow will generate overguard, meaning that you get overguard gating quite easily, and you might get the ability to discard your Primed Sure-Footed because you will get status immunity from the overguard being generated by Sow. I'm running Amalgam Barrel Diffusion for the dodge speed, which is nice quality of life. Primed Fulmination for a massive reach of 14.4 meters, spreading Viral. And then Augur Seeker is here to help out with the shield gating, as I mentioned, but also to further increase the status duration, so enemies are left with this viral effect for a long time. Lethal Momentum is really nice because it ups the projectile speed, because the Epitaph bullet that you shoot is a projectile that has travel time. So the faster it is at enemies, the easier it is to proc all of these status effects on them. Then for the melee, I'm using the Rakta Dark Dagger. The Rakta Dark Dagger is here as a shield gating option, because we get shield gating from dealing radiation status effect damage to enemies, which we do by melee influence. So it's a viral electric melee influence Rakta Dagger build with massive range, some increased status duration, high attack speed, and a good amount of status from Weeping Wounds. And this is all to also spread viral. If you run out of Epitaph bullets, for instance, and you still want to spread viral, you can do so by using your Rakta Dark Dagger, which will help out with keeping up the nuking with Sow and Reap. Then for the Nautilus Prime, I'm running this build. This is the min-max build, where I'm using Reinforced Bond together with Calculated Redirection, because with the Prime version of Nautilus, we now get over 1200 shields, so we meet the requirement for Reinforced Bond, which is super nice. If you want a cheap build, I would recommend something like this, where I'm using Synth Deconstruct, which will pair with the cheap version of the Sevagoth build. For the Verglas, I'm running this build right here. This will deal viral and heat, which will spread amongst some enemies. You can also go with the mini frost setup, as I call it, where you use Shivering Contagion to spread cold amongst enemies. The corrosive doesn't really matter here because we don't care about armor stripping, as we're dealing true damage with the nuke. So you can run whatever kind of status combination you want there. I just put it in for the extra status chance. Then for the cheap version of the first build, it looks like this. So this will deal significantly less damage, but it will still be very nice on base star chart. Then finally, I want to cover the focus school. The focus school I've chosen is Madurai. You can also go for Unairu if you want status immunity. You will get that from, let me see, Poise. So once you go into your operator, you will get a certain duration of status immunity, which is really nice if you're spamming the Epitaph, which can be a replacement for Prime Sure-Footed if you don't have it. However, I went with Madurai for the Sling Strength ability, where I get 40% extra ability strength when I sling at the ground twice in a quick succession. And because you want to be an operator every now and then to trigger the passive overguard generation, this combines nicely with Roar as well, increasing damage, and with Reap and Sow, increasing the true damage too. So then for the cheap versions of all of the builds, I already covered some, but I will just show them all in quick succession right now. This will be the cheap version of the Sevagoth build. This will only cost you 2 Forma, so it's 1 Forma here with the 2 dashes and then 1 in your aura polarity with the 2 dashes for brief respite, or an aura Forma as well would work. Instead of Energize, I'm using Molt Efficiency for increased duration, and then I'm using Equilibrium to uphold the energy economy that we need, together with the Synth Deconstruct on the Nautilus that I've shown before. So here is the cheap build for the Nautilus again with Synth Deconstruct. Then for the Verglas, for the cheap version, you can run this build right here. For the primary, you can choose whatever weapon you like, and whatever weapon scales well with additional crit chance. So for instance, the AX52, which got recently released, is very good with crit chance, so you can choose that, or any other weapon that has a good critical damage multiplier will work completely fine. Then for the Epitaph, the cheap primer build will look something like this, where you can get away with using a rank 0 secondary fortifier. Then for the cheap version of the Epitaph build, it looks like this. So I slotted all the normal versions of these mods, and instead I opted for increasing my fire rate by an extra amount, causing viral to be spread just by shooting a bunch of bullets around. And I believe you can get away with this Epitaph build with 2 Forma. Then the Rakta Dark Dagger will be mostly the same. You can replace Reach with a normal Reach and Fury with a normal Fury or Berserking Fury, and you are pretty much good to go. Okay, so that covers pretty much all of the builds. Let's first show you the min-maxed build and what it does. So here we are. So what you do is quite easy. You cast Sow to inflict Sow on all of these enemies. As you see, I'm now dealing damage. You go into your operator, sling at the ground. Now you can see that I am also passively generating overguard. You can then cast Roar. You can cast Sow again, and then you cast Reap, and everything starts dying with a couple of casts. So to show you once more, sling at the ground, cast Sow, cast Reap, everything is now dead. And that will pretty much spread across the entire map, as long as new enemies are within the range of other enemies dying. Now, what I also want to show is how viral impacts this interaction. So I will quickly reset my frame right here. So now there's no roar anymore. What will happen is viral will be able to give you 325% extra damage on your true damage, which is already 25% of their current health. Meaning that if enemy targets are on max health and I have 325% extra, I get above 100% true damage, meaning that they will instantly die. So without me needing to have a really high amount of power strength or a really high amount on my roar to instantly kill enemies, I can instead just prime them with a bunch of viral, cast Sow, cast Reap, and then everything is dead as well. However, spreading viral is a little bit less reliable, especially to have it at 10 stacks, because everything will be dying so fast. However, this viral interaction also means that if you do not want to run Nautilus, which I just did purely for the video, you can also run a Panzer Vulpaphyla with viral quills to spread viral passively amongst a large group of enemies. But as I said, it's highly likely that they won't have 10 stacks. Nevertheless, it will still increase your damage by a significant amount, and it will increase the chance of chain reactions occurring more often. Now, if I go to the cheap versions of all of these builds and show you how that works, do mind that I have 4 ability strength shards. So at the moment I should be at 70% power strength, meaning that I at least need Molt Augmented to go halfway to see the same effect as I just did on the other build. So we go and we apply a bunch of viral. This is now the cheap build, and everything is still one shot. And that will pretty much be it. So this is how you play Nuke Sevagoth. I will have some gameplay of a circular survival at the end, so you can see what the gameplay sort of looks like and what I am doing. Also, don't forget that once you cast Sow, you sometimes have to go into your operator to get the passive overguard regeneration, which is very beneficial to staying alive because Sevagoth can be quite squishy. With that, I want to thank you all for tuning into this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to stay updated with the latest Warframe content, and leave a like on this video if you learned something or if you will be using this Sevagoth nuke build yourself. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.